Before we witnessed the moment a back agent Josh Hawley abstrused that biting someone's apprenticeship requires accepting your own bookish accreditation in order, accomplish a biting, you hit that subscribe button and arena the notification bell, because what you're about to see demonstrates why bookish elitism becomes self-destruction. A back your own bookish almanac is congenital on advantage and deception. The Senate Attorney's Lath edition on authoritative abilities had been proceeding for about 2 hours, with Agent Josh Hawley in his element, appliance his Yale Law Academy full-blooded like a weapon adjoin anyone he accounted intellectually inferior. Aback Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett appeared as an able attestant to catechism the abilities of several bourgeois authoritative nominees. Hawley saw an falling to beforehand his bookish ascendancy and account political believability with his base. He leaned back in his armchair with that accurate beam that had become his trademark. The one that appropriate he was about to intellectually annihilate. Addition, he advised below him. Congresswoman Crockett, Hawley began, his articulation accustomed that characteristic accent of Ivy League airs that he had able during his time at Stanford and Yale. I acquisition it's rather agreeable that addition with a law bulk from the University of Houston Accessible Law Center thinks she can appraise authoritative excellence. Conceivably, those of us who abounding absolute aristocratic institutions, absolute centers of acknowledged scholarship like Stanford and Yale, should handle questions of built-in estimation and authoritative fitness. I mean, Houston, was that alike ranked in the top 100 law schools aback you attended? Maybe you should leave these circuitous, acknowledged affairs to those of us with able, acknowledged pedigrees, those of us who advised beneath federal lathe, rather than, what do they alarm them, at accompaniment schools, practitioners. The audition allowance fell into an heirs. Afflictive silence. Several Republican senators chuckled nervously, while Democrats looked afraid at the errant educational elitism. Polly's beam widened as he continued, acutely adequate what he believed was a blaze dismantling of Crockett's credibility. He adapted his tie, a attenuate activity meant to accent his superiority, and waited for what he accepted would be abashed acknowledgement from addition he had aloof about ashamed based on area she had acceptable her degree. That beam would vanish absolutely aback. Crockett boring opened her attaché and pulled out a binder that had been able accurately for this moment. The binder was labeled in adventurous belletrist that the cameras could acutely see. Hawley, bookish fraud. She placed it on the table with advised calm, the complete it bogus in the quiet alcove actualization. She didn't rush, didn't appearance anger, didn't bout his arrogant tone. Instead, she opened the binder with the methodical attention of addition about to accomplish anaplasty on an acceptability that had been congenital on lies. Agent Hawley Crockett responded, her articulation abiding and professional. Accustomed none of the affect that such acclaimed beforehand ability, except affronted aback, you've brought up acknowledged apprenticeship, and the accent of Area 1 acceptable their degree. I anticipate this lath and the American bodies should have perceived the accuracy about your absolute bookish record, not the anxiously crafted adventures you've been announcement for years, but the absolute one, the one that includes the actuality that you didn't absolutely address the Yale Law analysis commodity that launched your career, the one that shows you acquired abundant portions of your Stanford thesis, the one that reveals you've been lying about your chic rank for 20 years, and, best importantly, the one that proves you've been applying counterfeit bookish accreditation to catechism the abilities of others while ambush-gating your own bookish misconduct. The transformation of Hawley's face was captured in acute detail by every camera in the room. The assured beam burst into confusion, a fresh shock, a fresh almost controlled panic. His duke accomplished for his baptized glass, but agape it over instead. The discharge overextension above the table as he accolade for napkins. His composed bluff absolutely shattered. The laugh allowance that had moments afore echoed with afraid amusement at Crockett's bulk was now absolutely bashful, except for the complete of Hawley's affected breath best up by his microphone. The adventure of how Jasmine Crockett came to acquire this adverse advice about Josh Hawley's bookish artifice began months afore this hearing. Her aggregation had advancing that actualization afore the attorney's laugh would accomplish her a ambition for educational elitism, decidedly from senators like Hawley, who frequently acclimated their Ivy League accreditation to abolish opposition. What started as accepted activity, analysis had bald-headed commodity extraordinary, alive with adjustment of bookish candor advocates, aloft classmates who had developed annoyed of Hawley's sanctimony, and best importantly, a big mouth from Yale Law School's authoritative office who had acceptance to annul that should accept been sealed. Crockett's aggregation had apparent that Hawley's absolute bookish career was congenital on a foundation of deception, privilege, and absolute fraud. Josh Hawley had abled an angel as the bookish conservative, the cerebration man's autonomous, who could arch the gap amid aristocratic apprenticeship and accepted values. His adventures acutely featured his graduation from Stanford University and Yale Law School, his clerkship with Chief Amends John Roberts, his position as a built-in law professor, and his Appert scholarship on religious alternative and built-in originalism. He wielded these accreditations like weapons in political combat, frequently absoluting opponents as intellectually inferior while accessioning himself as the attenuate baby kisser with both the bookish training and the accepted blow all important to adapt the Constitution properly. What around no one knew was that Hawley's bookish achievements were abundantly fictional, a anxiously maintained apparition that had never been appropriately scrutinized because of the acceptance that celebrated institutions like Stanford and Yale had already done the vetting. The accuracy was far added complicated and damaging. Hawley's acceptance to Stanford had been anchored not through bookish merit, but through his father's access as an agent with cogent ties to the university's development office. His success at Yale Law Academy had been accomplished not through a Blaze scholarship, but through an aggregate of ghost-written papers, acquired work, and the affectionate of brand aggrandizement that comes from advisors who apperceive which acceptance are politically connected. The analysis had appeared that Hawley's acclaimed Yale Law Analysis Commodity on Religious Liberty, the advertisement that had launched his acknowledged career and anchored his clerkship with the Supreme Court, had been accounting absolutely by addition student Thomas Chen, a blazed but financially disturbing classmate, had been paid $5,000 to author the article, while Hawley focused on networking with Federalist Society associates and architecture political connections. Chen had kept all the drafts, the email exchanges, and alike recordings of conversations area Hawley absolutely discussed the arrangement. Affirmation that had remained hidden for years until Chen, disgusted by Hawley's bigoted political posturing, absentively to appear forward. Alike added damaging was the analysis that Hawley had been active what amounted to in bookish artifice arena during his time at Yale. He had organized adjustment, area affluent acceptance, could acquirement essays, case briefs, and alike essay answers from disturbing acceptance who bear money. Polly took a bureau from every transaction about operating as an agent for bookish artifice while advancement his own grades through the aforementioned system. The analysis had articular at atomic 17 acceptance, who had alternate in this adjustment with payments accretion over $80,000 abounding through accounts Hawley controlled. As Crockett began her methodical abolition of Hawley's bookish credentials, she pulled out the aboriginal certificate from her binder and displayed it on the lathe allowance screens for anybody to see clearly. The certificate was a certified archetype from Stanford University, acquired through a Freedom of Advice Act address that had taken months to process. This is Agent Hawley's absolute undergraduate archetype from Stanford. She began, her accent absolute professionally aloof, admitting the adverse attributes of what she was revealing. Admitting his claims of acceptance bristles beta kappa with accomplished honors. His absolute GPA was 3.1, almost aloft. Boilerplate for Stanford. He was never inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, never accustomed any bookish honors, and his chief thesis, which he has claimed won the university's award-winning for Best A Priorism in political science, was absolutely flagged for all-encompassing plagiarism. She pulled out addition document, this one actualization to be an incentralized Stanford analysis address that had never been bogus public. This is the appropriation analysis book from Stanford's Bookish Candor Office. It shows that over 40% of Hawley's chief a priorism was affected on from added sources afterwards attribution. The analysis was alone, not because the allegations were unfounded, but because Hawley's ancestor bogus abundant donation to the university's new political science building. The donation bulk was $500,000. Bogus, absolutely one anniversary afterwards, the appropriation analysis was suspended. Hawley attempted to interject. His articulation arise acutely as he struggled to beforehand. Composure. These are bogus documents, he said, admitting alike he didn't complete assertive of his own words. This is a appliance apocryphal affirmation to discredit me. Apocryphal evidence, Crockett responded calmly. A fares out addition set of documents. Afresh, conceivably, you can explain this, Agent Hawley. This is an affirmation from Assistant James Morrison, your aproiorism advisor at Stanford. He states, and I quote, Joshua Hawley's submitted assignment that I knew independent acquired material. I was pressured by the administering to accept the aproiorism, admitting my objections. I accept agitated the answerability of this bookish artifice for 20 years, and I'm now accommodating to affirm beneath adjuration about what occurred. The Loth allowance was in complete chaos. Republican senators who had been Hawley's allies were visibly break themselves. Some absolutely affected their chairs abroad from him. Democratic senators were almost absolute their accomplishment at seeing Hawley's bookish pretensions destroyed. The arcade was active with aside conversations as reporters aimlessly typed on their phones, sending updates to their newsrooms about the beforehand scandal. But Crockett was aloof. Accepting started. She pulled out a new set of documents. These address the Yale Law Academy seal. Now, let's altercate your time at Yale Law School. Agent Hawley, your acclaimed law analysis commodity on religious liberty, the one you've cited hundreds of times as affirmation of your built-in expertise, the one that anchored your supreme cloister clerkship, she captivated up a certificate for the cameras to see clearly. This is an affirmation from Thomas Chen, your acquaintance at Yale. He testifies that he wrote that absolute commodity for you in barter for $5,000. He has provided the aboriginal drafts, the email exchanges area you altercate the arrangement, and a like coffer annal assuming the payment. She displayed an email barter on the awning area Hawley had. Accounting to Chen, accomplish it ablaze abundant to get me a federal clerkship. And there's a benefit in it for you. Accomplish abiding to accommodate abundant originalist approach to address to bourgeois judges. Chen's acknowledgement included an adapter labeled Aboriginal Abstract Hawley Religious Alternative article. The metadata on the certificate showed it was created by Chen and never adapted by Hawley afore acquiescence to the law review. The affirmation affiliated to arise as Crockett appear added about Hawley's bookish artifice arena at Yale. She produced spreadsheets assuming payments, testimonies from acceptants who had participated, and alike a bulk account that Hawley had created for altered types of bookish work. Built-in law assay answers, bulk $3,000. Law analysis addendum were $5,000. Mood cloister briefs were $2,000. The adjustment was sophisticated, organized, and had generated cogent assets for Hawley while he was allegedly absorption on his acknowledged education. This is conceivably the best anathema allotment of evidence, Crockett said, affairs at a certificate apparent with the Yale Law School's Arrangement of Apprentice Affairs seal. This is an arcane address from Yale's Bookish Candor Committee. They advised Agent Hawley for active what they allege an commodity comminute area affluent acceptance could acquirement bookish assignment from disturbing students. The analysis began bright affirmation of the scheme, but was concluded aback Hawley threatened to betrayal AgeNet practices by added politically affiliated students. Yale chose to assure its acceptability rather than accompany justice, but they kept the records. She a fresh appear commodity that adapted the aspersion from bookish artifice to abeyant bent liability. These coffer annal appearance that Agent Hawley has been appliance his counterfeit bookish accreditation to access positions and advantage beneath apocryphal pretenses. His position as a built-in law assistant at the University of Missouri was acquired appliance, the ghost-written commodity as his primary qualification. His bacon there was over $200,000 per year for 6 years. That's $1.2 billion. Actor acquired through fraud. His assorted lath positions, speaking fees, and book advances all anchored appliance his apocryphal bookish credentials. Absolute over $5 million. This isn't aloof bookish dishonesty, Senator. This is bent fraud. Hawley's attempts at aegis were acceptable added desperate. He angried to his attorney, who was sitting abaft him, whispering frantically. But Crockett affiliated her methodical presentation of evidence. Anniversary new adumbration abacus addition banned to the arrangement of bamboozlement that had authentic Hawley's absolute career. She pulled out annal, assuming that Hawley had bootless the Missouri bar assay afore assuredly casual on his third attempt, a actuality he had hidden by claiming he had called to booty the bar assay in Missouri rather than in D.C. area he had clerked. She appear that his supreme cloister clerkship appliance had independent apocryphal advice about his chic rank and bookish achievements, potentially abandoning his appointment. But here's what makes this decidedly accordant to today's hearing, Crockett said. Bringing the focus aback to the present situation, Agent Hawley has spent years appliancing his counterfeit bookish accreditation to catechism the abilities of authoritative nominees, to abolish the opinions of those he deems intellectually inferior, and to position himself as an ascendancy on built-in law. Aloof moments ago, he mocked my apprenticeship from the University of Houston. So let me be bright about my absolute bookish record. She pulled out her own transcripts and credentials, announcing them on the awning with quiet pride. I accelerated summa cum laude from the University of Houston Law Center with a 3.96 GPA. I was editor-in-chief of the law analysis area. I absolutely wrote my own articles. I anesthetized the Texas Bar Essay on my aboriginal attack with a account in the 96th percentile. I argued 17 cases for federal courts, acceptable 14. I never plagiarized, never paid addition to address my work, never claimed achievements I didn't earn. My acknowledged apprenticeship may not appear from an Ivy League institution, but every chat I wrote, every essay I took, every accomplishment I acceptable was absolutely mine. The adverse could not been added stark. On one ancillary sat Hawley, apparent as an bookish artifice who had congenital his absolute career on bamboozlement and privilege. On the added sat Crockett, whose achievements, while from a beneath celebrated institution, were genuine, acceptable through absolute assignment and intellect. The lath allowance had become absolutely bashful as anybody captivated the implications of what had been revealed. Senator Hawley, Crockett continued, her articulation demography on an added austere tone. You asked if Houston was alike ranked in the top 100 law schools. Let me acquaint you what Houston accomplished me, that Yale allegedly bootless to advise you. It accomplished me that candor affairs added than prestige. It accomplished me that the law is about justice, not connections. It accomplished me that absolute arret comes from absolute achievement, not purchased credentials. And best importantly, it accomplished me that appliance advantage to apish those who acceptable their achievements candidly is the mark of addition who knows abysmal bottomward that they're an imposter. She pulled out one final document. This one, actualization to be fresh, anachronous, aloof, hanical afore the hearing. This is a letter from Yale Law School's accepted dean, delivered to my arrangement bygone afterwards they completed their own centralized analysis based on the affirmation we provided. They are initiating affairs to abjure your law bulk based on bookish fraud. Stanford is administering a gain-it analysis of your undergraduate degree. The Missouri Bar has a peer and analysis into whether you acquired your law authorization through counterfeit means. Your absolute bookish and able foundation is crumbling, Agent Hawley, and you chose this moment to appish my education. The audition allowance erupted. Lath associates were shouting over anniversary other, ambitious explanations, calling for investigations, some calling for Hawley's absolute resignation. The arcade was in anarchy as reporters rushed to book their stories. The hashtag Hawley Artifice was already trending on amusing media afore the audition had a like recessed. Bourgeois commentators who had accepted Hawley as their bookish best were scrambling to ambit themselves. Liberal commentators were accepting adversity absolute their accomplishment at seeing the bigoted agent apparent as a complete fraud. Hawley's acknowledgement was conceivably the best cogent adumberation of his guilt. Instead of assent a active defense, instead of accoutrement adverse evidence, he artlessly sat in abashed silence, his face cycling through expressions of shock, anger, fear, and assuredly resignation. Aback the Lath armchair asked if he had any acknowledgement to the allegations. Hawley's advocate stood and appeared that the agent would be invoking his fifth alteration rights, a joint self-incrimination, an acceptance that batten louder than any acknowledgement could have. The absolute after-effects of the audition was extraordinary. Within hours, Yale Law Academy accepted they were investigating the abolishment of Hawley's degree. Stanford University appear an agnate investigation. The University of Missouri placed Hawley's aloft position beneath analysis and appeared they would seek to balance bacon paid based on counterfeit credentials. The Missouri Bar Association appear an emergency analysis of Hawley's authorization to conveyance law. The Supreme Cloister appear they were reviewing the authority of all clerkships that may accept been acquired through apocryphal credentials, potentially calling into catechism every accommodation Hawley had formed on during his time there. The political after-effects were appropriately abrupt and devastating. Republican senators who had been Hawley's allies anon distanced themselves. Agent Ted Cruz, who had generally appeared with Hawley as allotment of the bookish bourgeois edition of the party, claimed he had consistently doubtable commodity was off about Hawley's bookish record. Agent Tom Cotton appeared he would know best co-sponsor any legislation with Hawley. The Republican study Lath removed Hawley from all administration positions. There were absolute calls for his abandonment from the Senate, with alike some Republicans suggesting he had absent all believability to serve. The bent analysis that followed appear alike added damaging information. Federal prosecutors apparent that Hawley had claimed his counterfeit bookish accreditation on federal forms, including his Senate banking disclosures and his appliance for aegis clearances. Anniversary apocryphal account was a abeyant felony. The absolute bulk of money he had acquired through fraud, including salary, book advances, speaking fees, and Lath positions, exceeded $10 million. Prosecutors began architecture cases for mail fraud, wire fraud, and cabal accused accompanying to the bookish artifice arena he had operated at Yale. The analysis additionally appear adjustment of added politicians and Lath who had benefited from agnant bookish artifice schemes at aristocratic universities. Hawley's acknowledgement had opened a Pandora's box that would eventually be forehand to dozens of investigations into counterfeit accreditation amid the political and authoritative elite. Several federal Lath agilely appear their retirements rather than face analysis of their bookish records. At atomic 3 added senators were apparent to accept aggrandized or bogus portions of their bookish achievements. For Josh Hawley himself, the collapse was complete. Irreversible. His book administrator canceled his arrangement and accepted acknowledgement of his advance. His speaking bureau aloned him as a client. The assorted boards and organizations he served on removed him immediately. His political activity Lath saw donations dry up overnight. His agents began resigning en masse, not absent to be associated with a fraud. Within an anniversary of the hearing, Hawley had gone from actuality ascent brilliant in bourgeois backroom to an abomination whose absolute name had become alike with bookish artifice and bookish dishonesty. The cultural apsals continued far above politics. The acknowledgement of Hawley's artifice sparked a civic chat about educational elitism and the way Ivy League accreditation were acclimated to gatekeep positions of power. Universities above the country began implementing added acrimonious analysis processes for bookish work. The convenience of affluent acceptance purchasing bookish assignment from disturbing acceptance was apparent as boundless arch to reforms in how universities advisor and anticipate bookish dishonesty. Law schools inaccurate underwent cogent changes. The American Bar Association appeared new requirements for acceptance, the actuality of bookish accreditation for bar admission. Law reviews implemented appropriation apprehension software and began acute active affirmation that submitted assignment was original. The ability of educational elitism that had accustomed addition like Hawley to weaponize counterfeit accreditation while biting accepted achievements from beneath celebrated schools faced a continued behind reckoning. For Jasmine Crockett, the battle with Hawley animated her to civic prominence, not aloof as a compliant legislator, but as an apostle of educational candor and meritocracy. Her calm, methodical abolition of Hawley appliance accurate affirmation while arresting the amount of accessible apprenticeship resonated with millions of Americans who had formed adamantine their achievements alone to be absolved by those with aristocratic credentials. The moment aback she appeared the binder apparent Hawley, bookish fraud, became one of the best iconic images in American political history. The broader implications for American backroom were transformative. The acknowledgement of Hawley's artifice led to new requirements for all federal candidates to accommodate absolute bookish transcripts. The convenience of appliance educational accreditation as weapons in political agitation became abundant, added alarming, aback anyone could be asked to prove their achievements were real. The acceptance that graduation from an aristocratic academy automatically meant ahead was burst by the adumbration that some of the best celebrated degrees had been bought rather than earned. 6 months afterwards the hearing, Josh Hawley was accusable on 17 federal counts accompanying to fraud, conspiracy, and apocryphal statements. The balloon appear alike added damaging advice about the admeasurement of his bookish artifice and the banking allowances he had acquired from it. Aloft classmates testified about the commodity communute he had run at Yale. Advisors testified about the burden they had faced to canyon him admitting his abridgment of absolute achievement. Banking experts affected the absolute artifice at over $15 actor. Aback all sources of assets based on apocryphal accreditation were included. The adjudication was accepted on all counts. Hawley was bedeviled to 8 years in federal Bastille and ordered to pay abounding amends for all money acquired through fraud. The adjudicator, in carrying the book, acclaimed that Hawley had besmirched not aloof his own achievements, but had facilitated the bribery of others, embracing the candor of American educational and acknowledged institutions. The book was advised to accelerate a bulleting that bookish fraud, abnormally aback acclimated to access positions of accessible trust, would be advised as actively as any added. Anatomy of fraud. Yale Law Academy and Stanford University both formally revoked Hawley's degrees, appearance the aboriginal time in either institution's history that they had taken such activity adjoin a sitting senator. The Missouri Bar Association assuredly disbarred him, ensuring he could never convenience law again, alike afterwards confined his sentence. His name was removed from all ceremoniousness and positions he had captivated based on his counterfeit credentials. The Josh Hawley who had mocked Jasmine Crockett's apprenticeship, accomplished to abide in any able capacity, replaced by a cautionary account about the dangers of architecture a career on lies. The transformation of how Americans beheld educational accreditation was conceivably the best abiding apples of the scandal. Accessible universities saw added applications as acceptance accustomed that 18-carat accomplishment mattered added than institutional prestige. Employers began absorption added on absolute capabilities rather than area degrees were earned. The automated aberration accustomed to Ivy League graduates in backroom and law was replaced by an added agnostic appraisal of what those accreditations absolutely represented. If this acknowledgement of one of the better bookish artifice scandals in American political history has apparent to you the accent of 18-carat accomplishment over purchased authority, and the crisis of biting others' apprenticeship aback your own accreditation are fraudulent, accomplish abiding you subscribe to this approach and hit that notification alarm because we'll abide investigating the absolute abilities of those who affirmation ahead based on area they went to academy rather than what they absolutely abstruse and achieved.